好，今天我们是讲这个三系六出哈。上次有三系有讲了啊，那今天讲六出。
So today we're going to continue our discussion about the three course aspects, the three subtle aspects and the six course aspect. Last week we began by discussing the three subtle aspect, and today we'll proceed on to the six course aspects.
那么可能要再复习一下三系啊，三系就是系到大家不知道它是烦恼，就是无明能所啊，就是我在讲，你在听，那这就是无明，这一般人不会觉得这是烦恼。
A brief review. First, we'll review about the three subtle marks or the three subtle aspects of the mind that they're so subtle that usually people don't even perceive them as being problematic. And so overall, the three subtle marks are ignorance or delusion, and the notion of duality, subject and object. So the very fact that you feel that I am doing the talking and you are sitting there doing the listening, that notion in and of itself is problematic.
这个三系有了三系以后，接下来再从三系那变成六出啊。那这个我们生活上到处都是啊。那譬如说，我看到你，对不对？我看到一个人像，那我把它当成是当一个人。那接下来就是有能看的我跟所看的外境，然后所看的人。那接下来我再根据这个能所，再产生说，你最近好吗？或者说，你有什么事？那我们这句话还是能所的，那这句话再跟你互动，那后面的我们叫六出哈。六出我们就可以在生活上用生活上来解释六出。
So the three subtle aspects manifest into six course aspects or the six course marks. And so these are delusions that we have, and we evoke them day in and day out. Let's use a concrete example, the fact that I see you right now. The first delusion that we have is that when you see a visual image, you perceive that you think of it as a real person. And then furthermore, you feel that there is a me, I, who is a subject, who's doing the seeing, and there is the other people that are the external phenomenon. They are the object of my seeing. So that is the notion of duality of subject and object. And then furthermore, once you see that person, you may inquire about that person and say, how are you doing lately? Is everything all right? That talking itself is also operating under the influence of duality.
这个三系六出，可以用楞严经的来解释，也可以用12因缘来解释。然后我们说我们的水路啊、咽口啊、什么37缘这些法位，一开始都会提到这些东西，提到整个是三系跟六出。
These three subtle marks and six course marks, we can find explanations about it in the Surangama Sutra or in the concept of 12 dependent origination. Also in the ceremony of water and land, water and earth, as well as in the ceremony to feed the hungry ghosts and the recitation of mindfulness in 3 sessions. In all these different ceremonies and texts, we can find explanations of the 3 subtle marks and 6 coarse marks.
那这个我先讲一下楞严经。楞严经是什么？就是我们的真心啊，真心就是现在我正在讲话这个心啊，它本身是什么？是一直处在像镜子一样啊，它不动，但是它有种种功能啊。一般说我们叫可以感知，可以讲话，可以思考，很多功能，所有的功能啊。它的功能实际上是叫做照，叫做知。
So first of all, we'll explain the 3 subtle marks and 6 coarse marks by using the Surangama Sutra. In the Surangama Sutra, the term that is often used is the true mind. That is also our Buddha nature. And one characteristic of the true mind is that it's mirror-like. It's like a gray, clear mirror that it in itself is unmoving, does not move, yet it exhibits all different kinds of functions. It can be aware, can do talking, and we subsume all these different functions under the term that it can illuminate or illume.
那现在我们其实我们任何时间都是在这种状态。但是呢，我们的一个最关键的这边叫做一念妄动，一念不解啊，那产生无明能所。这边没有写了，无明能所就是有能所叫做无明啊，有能所叫做无明，或是有无明就是有能所，有主客。
So at all times, our true mind is in this state of being mirror-like, and it can illume anything, everything, and has all myriads of functions. And it's not here on the slide, but the reason why we become deluded and ignorant is because the mind became agitated and it moved, and giving rise to this to ignorance or delusion. And furthermore, giving rise to subjectivity and objectivity. Over here, delusion is kind of synonymous to this duality. When you are deluded, then you have the sense of subject and object. And when you are not, then it's non-dualistic. So the two terms, delusion and duality, is sort of synonymous.
我们用做梦来解释这个重生期望，就非常的明白。做梦哦，梦中的我们一般来讲说，路人甲、路人乙啊，还有你呀，什么导演啊、剪接呀，全部都是你，但是我们就是不知道。
If we use this, the process of dreaming, we can easily illustrate this concept of how delusion arises from the true mind. So when we're dreaming, may it be actors or the director or person A or B, these are all generated by your mind.
那我们先从梦中来说明这个什么，我们这边这个我们在梦中啊，基本梦中就是从我们的心性啊，那变现出来的。那在梦中，我们总结的有一个主体的我，那一个客观的环境，客观的环境里面可能有场景就是世界，那有其他的什么，其他的人就是众生啊。那这边就是众生，世界众生，当然一定有虚空的，还有世界众生。然后我就跟众生互动，那就产生，我们叫造业受果报啊。在梦中很清楚，就是这几个一直在进行。
So the dream is a manifestation of our mind, and in our dream, there is the subject self, the me, and in a position, there is the object or external phenomenon. It could be the setting of your dream, which in the sutra is called the world. And there are also people other people that's in your dream. Those are sentient beings. And so this subjective self in the dream interact with the external phenomenon, interact with all the people, sentient beings in the dream, giving rise to the motion of karma. And then from karma, gives rise to karmic results.
然后这个什么，我们通常梦又可以跟想啊做比对啊，其实白天的梦叫做想啊，那晚上的想叫做梦啊，这两个是一样的。
And from using dream to illustrate, then we can branch off and talk about the process of thinking and compare the two processes. And they're actually very similar. In fact, we can say that when you are dreaming during the day, we call that thinking. And during the night, when you are thinking, we call that dreaming.
然后我们通常讲说，梦里醒来嘛，我们叫梦醒了，对不对？但是事实上是什么？你梦醒了以后，马上又，师父讲说叫生死梦，马上另外一个梦，白日梦又跑出来了。
So when we wake up from our sleep, we often say, I have woken up from my dream. That may be a delusion as well, that when you feel you have woken up from your nighttime dreams, Shifu says that you enter the dreams of birth and death. So in another word, you enter another set of daydreaming during the daytime.
那就是白天的想哦，就晚上叫做梦，白天的想啊。我们的想呢，基本上是会什么？你想，那它起来就会消失哦。比如说你想张三，张三起来大概1秒钟就消失了。但是眼睛所看到的蟑螂大概不会消失，而是你所想的蟑螂会消失。
So when we're thinking during the day, when it's your thought, say you think of this person, that thought perishes fairly quickly. On the other hand, if you see an image in front of you, your feeling, the way you feel it, is that it doesn't perish as easily.
那我之前常讲说，你心中啊，就你所想的妈妈，对不对啊？不是妈妈，那不是实体的妈妈，那很多人听不懂啊。那反而是小孩子容易懂。有一个小孩子是说，啊你想妈妈，那想一下，那妈妈没有多久就消失，你不想就没有，想就有。可是实体的妈妈啊，就在你面前的妈妈，她不会消失的。但是我们的心中的妈妈会消失，但是我们心中的妈妈会消失，跟晚上的梦一样。你醒来以后，这些梦全都不见了。那想的话，你不想的话，这些你所想的妈妈什么一大堆的记忆全部不见了。
Before I used this analogy that says the mom that's manifest in your mind is not the same as the mom that's in the real world, the actual mom. I used this analogy for a number of years, and people often have a difficult time understand that concept. Adults do, at least, and kids seem to have an easier time understanding. A child once told me that I understand the concept because when I'm thinking about my mom in my mind, in a very short period of time, that thought perishes. Yet the real mom that's in front of me in the real world does not perish. So this goes to illustrate that the concepts are generated in our mind. It's just like our dream, except one is in daytime, the other one is at night. Those phenomenon that's generated by the mind, those perish really quickly. And by the same token, when the thought perishes, all the memories or associations that's related to that concept, to that term, also perishes.
所以就可能今天听的这个什么三系六出听不懂啊，或者说似懂非懂，那你只要记住说，你所想的啊，这些张三李四啊，那一个就跟梦一样不真实啊，那你把它当成真实的人，那就是有时候我们叫做记忆修理自己，那你就从这个地方，从这样的一个角度去，那我们的就是所有的烦恼都可以从这边下手。
So even though the main topic of today is the 3 subtle marks and the 6 coarse marks, you may walk away feeling that it's still rather abstract. It's hard to get a handle of it, really. So what it really boils down is that whatever that you're thinking of, a person, a thing, those are manifestations of your mind. They are dreamlike. They are not real. The problem arises when we treat those images and mental phenomena as real. And that's why people have a lot of afflictions and vexations, because we think of someone and we use that memory or the concept that is in our head to make ourselves uncomfortable or to punish ourselves with those mental concepts. And that's how a lot of vexations are generated. So if you use this concept of seeing those as mental phenomenons and not as real object or real person, you can use this method to treat a lot of your current vexations.
那这个就楞严经在讲这个三系六出啊，那一个，因为下次还会讲世界相系、众生相系、业果相系啊，所以我们现在就直接跳到那一个，等于是那个大乘集论的讲的三系六出啊。
So that is how the Surangama Sutra explains the 3 subtle marks and 6 coarse marks. And it goes further. In the following sessions, we're going to get into how from that delusion, the world and sentient beings and karma all arises as a consequence. So we will reserve that for later. And instead, today, we're going to zero in on 3 subtle marks and 6 coarse marks further. And we'll do this by bringing in the how it's being explained in the awakening of faith in Mahayana.
那这边我们在荧幕上这边有就是楞严经跟大乘经论的那个什么六出啊。楞严经是虚空世界众生业果啊，然后这一个大乘经论是什么自相、相续相、自周相、记名之相、造业相、受果报相，这两个是一样的。
Right here on the slides that you in front of you right now, this is how the 6 course marks are explained, and the terms that's used to explain them in the 2 texts. The first one, empty space, world, sentient beings, and karma, are the terms that's used in Surangama Sutra. On the other hand, in the awakening of Mahayana faith, the terms used are marks of discriminating knowledge, of continuity, of attachment, of defining names, of producing karma, and the effect produced by karma.
那这个世界虚空啊，虚空世界众生业果，还有下面的分类啊，这些全部都是生灭的东西，那就它来自于我们的佛性空性啊，那相当于海水跟波浪的关系。
So all these notions, space, world, sentient beings, and karma, as well as all the marks, the 6 course marks that's listed below, their commonality is they're all phenomenon that arises and perishes, and they are all generated from our Buddha nature. So the relationship of Buddha nature and all these phenomenon is that similar to that of the ocean and the waves on the ocean.
然后我们在禅修的时候，我们会讲做什么？就是比如说你的身体不见了还有你这个我们叫大地六尘，大地六尘就等于相当于世界就不见了。在禅修的时候就是什么？就是等身体在哪里也不晓得，那世界也不见了那还包括虚空粉碎，因为这些全部都是波浪所以它可以不见的
So when we are sitting in meditation, I explained earlier that people sometimes experience that body disappearing, or another phrase that comes up when we describe experiences in meditation is the phrase that all the dust have fallen on the great earth. In other words, it's the shattering of the empty space. So whether it's the physical body disappearing, the world disappearing, or even the empty space disappearing, all these can be shattered during as an experience when people are sitting in meditation. And the reason behind it is because they are all phenomenon that arises and perish. They're all just waves on the ocean. That is why they can be shattered.
那这一些我们讲说这些对象虚空世界众生业果主要的就是说你是有对象的假设我们的心能够不针对这类对象，那当下这些东西就会消失了。其实事实上，我们在每一个当下，我们眼前的师父讲说，我们眼前的现象，你看到的现象都是已经消失了。
So of all these objects, whether it's sentient beings, the world, or the karma, the reason why we perceive them is because we operate with duality. They are treated as objects of our awareness, of our mind. That's a delusion. When the mind does not target on any particular object, then they may in fact all perish. Shifu had explained to us earlier that actually whatever we perceive that we're seeing, whatever we see, are all phenomena that have already perished. And again, they're all just waves on the ocean.
我们在每天晚上就是什么？就我每天晚上都会经验这一个就是如果你能够很快速的睡着的话，就是什么？我不看不听不想不感觉身体，那很快的就是什么？这个世界还有你就消失了那早上你在想看然后就跑出来了在我们每天其实都可以经验到这一些东西是可以什么？可以消失的，但是我们没有特别注意
So we can experience this every night when we fall asleep. If you're someone who's able to fall asleep quickly, when you're about to fall asleep, that's when you sort of give yourself the direction that I'm not going to look, I'm not going to listen, I'm not going to think of anything, I'm not going to feel my body anymore. And when all these sensations have fallen away, stopped, then the world disappears, and then that's when you fall asleep. And when you wake up in the morning, you have the intention of perceiving all these sensory phenomenons again, and that is why the world manifests again right in front of you. So this process of this transition is something that we can experience on a daily basis, except that we go through our day not really paying attention to the transitions.
这个我们在比如说你早上刚醒来以后，那你想看，那这个世界就出现了那实际上世界出现的时候，你想看什么东西就出现了那出现以后，其实它是马上又是消失，只是我们又有什么 因为我们无明，就我们要用第二念去什么，就是去看已经消失的前念，或者跟已经消失的前念互动，所以这个能守无明就不断啊。所以我们这个眼前的世界，只要你没有想要睡觉，你张开眼睛，它都一直在的。其实你避开你眼睛闭起来，这个世界也是不见的。
So when wake up in the morning, you have the intention to see, and thus the world manifest appears in front of you. So whatever you want to see, whatever phenomena will appear in front of you. And they can actually perish at any given point simultaneously, instantly. All these phenomena don't last forever. But because of our deluded thinking, thinking that whatever has perished actually continues to exist. And this is because we use our second thought to interact or hang on and illume the first thought. This process is repeated using the latter thought to illume the prior thought, thinking that the prior thought is still there. And that is why we're constantly operating with under the influence of duality.
我想我们再来讲这个大乘的那个六出啊，让我们再跟我们的当下的经验来解释，来看看。
So let's go into the text a little bit more to talk about the 6 course marks as explained in the awakening of Mahayana faith. And then we'll try to tie that together with our daily experience.
那一个起心论是讲什么？志向啊，相续相，那这边他都有解释啊。那第一个志向是什么？那个不是智慧，它应该就是说是分别心啊，就是有会生灭的分别心啊，跟这个什么不生灭的分别心，就是佛性的这个智慧心不太一样哦。
So the first one, as explained in the awakening of Mahayana faith, is the mark of discriminating knowledge. In the Chinese version, the word 智 is being used, but Fashi makes a distinction between that 智. It doesn't mean wisdom here. It means discrimination, discriminating mind. And this discriminating mind, again, it will arise and perish, and it shall not be confused with the Buddha nature that does not perish and does not arise.
我们就境界哦，就是我们被我们感知，就是在境界外境嘛哈，我们就内心跟外境，或是心跟外境哦。那我们面对外境哦，第一个，因为我们不知道那个外境是已经消失的前念啊，前一个念头，我们一般不晓得，因为它跑得太快了啊，而且这个境界一直出现的啊，不会像我们打坐的时候偶尔出现一个念头出来就消失了。我们这个境界一直相续不断的，所以我们更加确定说是在什么是真实的哈。那我们面对境界的时候，因为觉得我们不会觉得是我们变现的，所以会跟他互动，然后会跟他分别。
So the relationship between the external phenomena and the mind is that we don't know, because our delusion, we don't know that the external phenomenon are manifestations of the mind that have already perished. The arising and perishing of these phenomenon is very rapid. It's so quick that we don't see them being gone, that they're the arising and perishing happening. We perceive that as a continuity. And it's not like when we're sitting in meditation that things kind of slow down or phenomena pop up when you are settled. The phenomenon pops up occasionally, and then you can clearly see it's arising and perishing. When we are actually in our daily setting, everything is happening so fast that we don't realize that changes have already happened, and we see that as being continuous and it persists.
那这个部分，就是一个是我们眼前的境界啊，那一个是什么？我们内心，我们内心也有时候自我对话，跟面对这个眼前的境界是一样的。
And this applies to both the external phenomena that's in front of us that we're seeing, and as well as our mental phenomenon. In our mind, we sometimes have conversations with ourselves. That's also a phenomenon that arise and perish. So the external and the mental phenomena are very similar in that way.
我们常常可以看到啊，比如说你在描述你刚刚发生的，刚刚跟人家互动，或是发生了一件事情跟人的时候，那你在描述的时候，其实那个就是记忆里面的东西啊。那你描述张三啊，还描述你，然后描述什么情境的时候，其实那个都是会生灭的啊。那我们不会觉得那全部都是我们觉得。当我在想到张三的时候，你会认为是张三的人，没有，那是记忆中的张三的影像，但是我们会觉得是外面的张三。
So, for instance, we are trying to describe to other people's an incident that had happened, or if you're trying to explain your interaction with so and so. When you are doing the describing, you are actually evoking phenomena that is in your memory, whether it's yourself or the person you're talking about, or even the setting or what the place is like. Those are just phenomena in your mind. And these mental phenomena arise and perish without us realizing that. And we keep thinking that when I'm talking about this person, I'm talking about the real person, not knowing that you're actually talking about a memory that is inside your head.
那这边呢，我们讲可能可以先跟那个我们实际上的经验对照，或是说跟这个什么摄影眼对照哦。我们碰到境界，然后就分这边的染境，应该可能可以讲说这个合意跟不合意哈。那染可能可以讲说不合意哈，那净就是什么？就是合意哈。就是说我们分合意跟不合意，那合意的话就喜欢，不合意就不喜欢哈。
We can also draw a parallel between the set of explanations of the 6 course marks with the 12 dependent origination, and that we can try to map it on with our real life experience. So when we encounter phenomena in the real world, some of them are considered, the term used here is polluted or contaminated. It's a rough translation, but what it's really referring to is what is favorable, preferred, and what is unfavorable. And we have give rise to different sets of reactions to these different phenomena.
那通常我们因为这些我们在眼前的其实跑得非常快哈。当你看到喜欢的时候，就你看到很合意的话，你产生快乐，那可能马上进一步就有一些反应哈。他们就是想要什么，想要再继续跟你喜欢的境互动哦。比如说我这个什么，我自己就曾经试过，就是观察我在打菜的时候，我在打的时候，我看看我有没有喜欢，有没有讨厌。结果我每次就是看到我的手都伸在我喜欢打的菜的上空了。那时候我是还是一个比较安定的心哈。那平常的话，你可能就是什么，你打的菜已经是打2道了。那我那时候特别注意的时候，我就发觉就是什么，你很快就看到你喜欢的菜跟不喜欢的菜，而且你已经有行为了哈。我看到的时候，我的手已经伸出去了哈。那 不是像这边讲那么慢的就是一个一个来它是很快的。
So when we applying this to the phenomenon that we're seeing in front of us, when you encounter a phenomenon that is favorable, we react to it very quickly. Say perhaps it generates a pleasant sensation, and then you further on quickly react to it with follow up with some actions, or you want to continue the interaction. I have observed myself and the inner working of this pattern during lunchtime. And I observe myself when I sense that I prefer something, there's a dish that I like, I see my hand already hovering over that dish. And this is happening in a situation where my mind is already very settled. And had my mind been in a less settled state, in a more chaotic state, in a more everyday kind of situation, I would not have seen how fast it has, this process has proceeded. By the time I notice, perhaps I have already picked out 2 of my favorite dishes. It's already landing in my plate. So this is all happening very, very quickly, and we act very quickly. My hands hovering over the dish. It's not a slow process. As it's being explained here on paper, it may appear to be slow, but it's actually very quick.
我想先把这个讲再拉实际上了，因为它跑得太快了那我们就什么的讲相续因为你喜欢的就是合意的产生爱嘛，那合爱的话相续相合，爱就产生乐不爱的就产生苦，那就有相续的一大堆的相续的念头，都跑得很快
Let me first explain all these first, and then I will connect that with real life experience. So moving on to the second one, mark of continuity. Again, between what is favorable and unfavorable, we react very quickly and grasping onto the one that's favorable and giving rise to anger to those that's unfavorable.
那这个接下来就是因为它跑得太快了那这边讲说直取向就是你顺着一个是见合意，然后产生苦跟乐通常是怎么？是因为合意而产生快乐，那不合意而产生什么？产生苦那因为有时候很快，那通常就是这两者苦。因为乐产生合意，或是因为合意产生乐那乐，那接下来就想要抓取嘛那这个跑得非常快，那它有时候是乐受产生爱，那有时候爱又产生乐受就交叉，那接下来就有一些行为，那再来它跑得非常快快的话就等于是这个里面就是什么这个六出这个其实在等一下我们就可以用什么用现实的生活应该是这个随时随地都在这个六出里面在运作
And like I said, I'm emphasizing that this is happening the mind works in lightning speed. It happens really quickly. So once you differentiate between the two, then it gives rise to the sense delusion of continuity. Then based on what is favorable to us or unfavorable, we have emotions of either pleasantness, happiness, or suffering. And if something is pleasant, then perhaps you want to grasp onto it. And then by grasping onto it, it reinforces it and gives further sense of happiness. So these are they intersect and interact. It's not one directional. It could be a loop, or it could the two, whether something's favorable, giving rise to pleasant feelings, and pleasant feelings then further gives rise to a favorable feeling. Those two interact with each other, And we can actually observe the inner working of these 6 course marks in our daily lives at all time.
就以我们很简单的，像我们现在我在讲，对不对？那你在翻译，对不对？那另外你们在听啊，这里面我的表情啊，我的表情还有我所讲的内容啊，实际上对你们来讲是境界啊。那这个境界有时候听得很受用，然后就产生喜欢嘛，对不对？产生舒服。那听不懂啊，或者我东扯西扯，那就产生就是什么？产生嗔心啊，或者不舒服啊。那最主要的是你是把我当成什么？当成人啊，当成心外的东西。
So let's take an example. I'm giving the talk right now, and Annie's translating, and the audience is listening. So the content of my talk is whether it's my facial expression or the content of the talk is considered a phenomenon, an external phenomenon. And you react to this content, this phenomenon. And if you feel that you are able to understand the content, then perhaps it gives rise to the feeling of that it's favorable. You like this talk, and then it gives you a sense of happiness. On the other hand, if you feel that the talk is disorganized, that it's very obscure, that you're having a hard time following, then you may have emotions of unhappiness because you dislike it. What you need to know is that when I'm sitting here talking and the sounds that is generated, these are all phenomenon, and they are manifestations of your mind. And the delusion that we have is that we treat it as something external, as a real person that's really out there.
然后你们正在听我讲的时候，一般人大概可能从来没有想到，那这一些你正在听，还有你所听的境界，都是你心中的东西。一般人大概不会想到。
And as you're listening, you probably have never thought of this before. The content that you're listening, the person you're listening to, and the act of listening, these are all phenomenon that's inside the mind.
那有一点可以确定的哈，就是我的声音啊，还有我的表情，肯定是你用你的心去注意，我们把它叫做你感知的哈。那一定是就是你明的哈，你感知的，你看到的，那叫明，就照明的明哦。那肯定那一定是你感知的哈。我这个色相，我这个声音，可能就是你明的，你感知的哈。
There's one thing for certain, whether it's my voice, my facial expression, my body language, these are all phenomenon that is attended to or is illumined by your mind. Again, these are all phenomenon that is illumined by your mind.
还有比如说你听了以后感觉舒服，或是说你做判断说，哎呀，怎么这样讲，对不对？那这一些感觉舒服也是你感觉，你用你的心感觉，然后你觉得说不好或是好，也是你用你的心去取向去感知的啊，全部从头到尾啊，就是这个事实，先不要讲说那个是你心中的东西，但至少都是你感知的，判断是你判断啊。说话是我说，可是是你感知的声音，你感知的色相，但是包括你判断的，当然这个色相是人，也是你判断的啊。那包括你说这个是声音，也是你判断的，都是由你的心在感知，然后再做判断啊。没有一个东西就离开你的感知啊，而有外境啊。
So, and then furthermore, as you're sitting there feeling that the talk is good, or you're judging and feel that it's all nonsense, And also then it further leads to your feelings of feeling good, pleasant, or feeling upset. These are, again, all phenomenon that is illumined, aware, perceived, attended to by your mind. Your mind become aware of these phenomenon and perhaps grasp onto them and interact with the phenomenon. My physical body is a physical phenomenon that is illumined by your mind. So it's your mind that is doing the being aware, and that's doing the judging. There is not one phenomenon that departs from your mind. There is not one phenomenon that is not aware, illumined, perceived by your mind.
那在这里面啊，就是说，我们在日常生活当中，大概要有几个，从开悟人来讲，有几个错误啊，而变成我们现在的一种经验啊。第一个啊，全部都是我们心中的东西。他叫做都是我心中的东西，他说都是我的，都是我，也都不是我啊。这一个我们并不知道啊，这第一个。那第二个，我们第二念碰不到第一念，那我们也不知道。
So, in our day-to-day experience, if someone from the perspective of enlightened people looking at us operating the way we are in our daily experience, they will probably say there are several errors that we have committed that is leading to the way we do things or see things these days in our daily setting. So first of all, the first error that we commit is that everything, we don't realize that everything are phenomenon inside our mind. Another phrase that we often use is that they're all me, but they're also all not me. All me and all not me. We don't realize that. We see them as external. We don't understand that they're all inside our mind. The second error, 法师还有那个第二个错误。The second error that we make is that when the second thought arises, it cannot come into contact or interact with the first thought. Again, we don't see that. We think the first one continue to exist, that these are actually individual thoughts that have arisen and perished. So the second thought cannot contact the first thought. And not knowing this is our second error. 法师好了。
好。大概主要的有两个啊，就是组成我们的一个新的运作模式。第一个啊，就是我们把被看到的色相、声相当成是有生命的人或是我啊，这是第一个啊。
So basically, there are two components that's working that is resulting to the way we use our mind, the way that our thought operates these days. First of all, there is the phenomena, the object that is being seen. Those are actually perceived by the mind. And the error is to perceive it as an actual person that is living and breathing, not knowing that it's a phenomenon that is perceived by the mind.
那第二点就刚才讲的说，你觉得我现前这一念可以碰到前面一念，或者说我这一念可以碰到我所感知的境界。
And the second one is, again, you feel that your second thought can come into contact with the first thought. Or to make it plainer is that you feel that whatever you perceive in front of you, a phenomenon that has already been perceived, and then you can come into contact with that phenomena, which actually has already perished.
那这样的一个，你看看，就是说我们在平常的经验哈，比如说 就我还是拿我讲经的这一个，我现在正在讲开示的例子啊，对不对？我在讲话的声音啊，还有我自己我自己的表情，那你们肯定会认为是人，对不对？这个跟你把一张相片啊当成人也是一样的哈。
Relating this back to our current experience, I'm going to use the same example of me giving the Dharma talk right now. So my voice or my facial expression, I'm pretty sure you see that as a true person, as that there's a real person that's in the voice or in the facial expression, as it embodies a real person. But the actual logic is that it's very similar to you looking at a photograph and thinking that it's a real person. These are all delusions. There's no real person behind a photograph or the voice or the facial expression.
这个就非常困难哦。这道理很简单，但是大家也想不通啊。但是平常我们又会什么？又会知道相片好像。你要知道它是相片，但是很多时候又把相片当成人啊，就像我们看这个现在看录影带啊，现在疫情的关系，录影带啊，很多人看录影带啊，那录影带肯定就是一些会动的相片嘛，里面没有人在里面嘛，但是我想应该90%人都是把它当成人啊。
This concept is really straightforward. Yes, for some reason it's very difficult to grasp, or that it's hard to truly understand it or use it. For instance, after all these explanations, you may know that when you're looking at a photograph, it's a photograph. It's not a real person. But then when we are leafing through the album and looking at the photographs, we then again have this delusions that it's a person, that we relate that with the actual person. Another example is right now we're in the midst of the pandemic, and during the pandemic, a lot of people are watching tons of TV, watching videos. So what consists of videos? Videos are a bunch of images that's moving, that's stacked together. There's no real people in those images, but I bet 90% of people who are watching these shows and videos still think that there are real people behind those images.
就像我们在看这个什么，我们在看电视的影像，比如说这个是什么，我们说已故已经死亡的总统，其实你还是把它当成人的，你不会觉得它是一个影像了。
When we're watching the news on TV, if you see a ex-president, a late president, you will say, "Oh, that is the late president." You are still connecting that with that person. Seldom are you going to really see that it's only an image on TV. That's not the person.
所以我之前碰到有一个人，他常常去殡仪馆助念啊。他说他很简单啊，说一个是有呼吸的哈，这有呼吸的跟没呼吸的，那会动的跟不会动的，两个是一样的哈，一个会呼吸，一个不会呼吸，都是一具尸体啊。
I met a person before, and this person shared with me that 法师是男众还是女众？
女众。
Okay, that she goes to morgues very frequently to recite for the deceased. And whenever she goes, she explains to me, oh, it's really easy to tell them apart, that they're all bodies there, except the difference is one is breathing and one is able to move, and the other one cannot breathe and cannot move. But it's just all bodies.
还有就是说，我自己在那个什么。在禅期啊，那碰到有2位菩萨啊，那他就突然想到他 他妈妈就情绪整个崩溃，可是他妈妈已经死掉了，可是当他那个记忆中的妈妈浮出来，他还是那个情绪很激动，这是一个。那另外一个是什么？另外一个是他爸爸已经死掉了，但是他还害怕在马路上会碰到他爸爸。
During I supervised some of the meditation retreats, and there were two people that I met. For the first one, during the interview sessions, she started talking about her mom, and she just broke down completely, having very strong emotions about her mom. But the truth of the matter is the mom has passed a long time ago. Mom is no longer alive. Yet, for some reason, this person still had a mental breakdown whenever she talked about her mom. And the second person is that the dad has also passed away, but this person kept having these fears that he or she is going to encounter her dad on the street. And this fear is irrational, but it still keeps coming up.
所以说在我们日常生活当中，如果能够很清楚的，真正的人是什么？是能够让身体动，然后让身体讲话，然后具有无量无边的功能的那个，我们有时候叫做佛性，那是真正的人。那其他的，你所看到的这个人的一个，等于是一个形体啊，那他都没有资格当成人。你说里面有一个，有时候就是布袋戏里面有一只手，让这个布袋戏可以动了，那只手才勉强叫做真正的人呢。
So in our everyday experience, we should strive to see this, that what a real person is someone who is capable of moving, talking, and who can perform all sorts of functions. That is the prerequisite of being a real person. In contrast, images or mental image or visual image, those images cannot perform myriads of functions. They cannot talk, cannot move, so they do not qualify as a true person. Another analogy to use to differentiate the two is the puppet and the hand that's inside a puppet. We can, stretching a little bit, but we can, for now, say that the hand that's inside the puppet is the true mind, the true person. The puppet, the shell, is not.
所以说，就是说，如果能够懂的，就是说，我们说，我们在可以驱动我们身体那个，他们叫做无畏真人不在任何一个位置，他不在任何地方，但是他又没有离开那个地方有时候我们叫佛性，叫法身那是真正的我。那你如果用这种方式，那再来看看你所看到的色相、声相那一个，那你在看待它的时候，你就不会把一个色相当成真人
So in other words, what it is that can move, can motivate, can initiate the actions is the true mind, the true person. Another phrase that we use is that the true person that does not abide in any particular status or position. That is a fixed phrase in the Chan school. So the true person is neither here nor does it depart. We call it Buddha nature or Dharma body. These are all words that's trying to capture the real me that's able to perform all different kinds of functions. So with that understanding, and then you use that understanding based on that, you try to then re-examine the phenomenon that you come across whether it's a visual phenomenon or a audio or oral phenomenon, those phenomenon itself cannot perform all the different functions. So they should not be given the status of being the real person or the true mind.
所以如果能够拉到比较高一点的最高的就是我刚才说无畏真人或是佛性或是法身才是真正的人，那其他的这些什么境界相啊、爱啊、苦啊、乐啊、造业啊、受报啊，那相当于是波浪或相当于作用。那再用这种方式来看这些，就比较容易懂了。
So let's bring our vantage point to a higher place. We should try to use this understanding to subsume the way that we experience the world. So understand this, the so-called true person without status, or another word to call it is Buddha nature, or Dharma body, they are all synonymous. Those can all perform all sorts of functions, and they should be deemed as the true person. In opposition, contrast, phenomenon, whether it's feelings of something favorable or not, and your pleasant sensations or whatever that is perceived, those are phenomena that cannot perform these functions. So they are not the true person or the true mind.
所以我们刚才用这个什么海水波浪来看看这一个刚刚第三个执取相就是我们顺着苦乐然后产生执着。那我这边的执着的解释就是第一个，当我们有苦的时候，我们大概会执着两个执着，一个是你会认为我苦，就执着这个苦的现象有我你不会觉得是一个苦的现象产生那第二个那这些现象其实它是生灭的那这一个苦跟乐其实要什么？这是相对的那我们知道相对的，我们知道一个时间只有一念而已苦若是没有乐的时候，你其实是不知道苦的那一个时间只有一念，所以基本上是什么？不应该有苦跟乐，因为一个时间只有没有两念的那另外一个是没有我，但是我们会觉得有我苦，你不会觉得是一个苦的现象产生。那另外一个苦跟乐不能同时产生，但是苦没有乐，你不知道它是苦，所以就是我们每个当下的执着有我执着这一个有这些苦乐的现象所以说这个就是什么产生执着
So the third mark of attachment, the third of the 6 course marks, is the mark of attachment. It's continuing from the previous of the giving rise to favorable and unfavorable feelings, and then people become attached to the phenomenon. Underneath this, under this category, this third mark, there are 2 levels of misunderstanding. One is you feel that I am suffering, not knowing that there's no person in the suffering. It's a phenomenon. Suffering is only a phenomenon. The second level of misunderstanding is that because it's a phenomenon, it arises and perish. And in any given point in time, there should only be one phenomenon that arises, and it has to perish before the second one arises. Yet, this notion of suffering, the sense of suffering cannot come about when it's not compared with happiness, bliss. So those two, to know that something is suffering, you first also need to know that it's happiness. Suffering is defined as the opposite of happiness. But once there's suffering, that thought is present. There are no other thoughts. So the sense of comparison actually cannot happen. There are no two thoughts that can arise simultaneously. So there's really no point in talking about suffering, because it's only one present thought, and there are no other thoughts to compare that to. So those are the two levels of misunderstanding that is under the mark of attachment.
接下来就是后面的记名指向的话，就是我们用名字来把很多东西把它贴标签，那透过名字，然后去抓各种的相，或者组合各种的相那其实这些东西都是我们心中的东西，连名字也是我们心中的东西。但是透过名字去组合或是去分类那这样的话就透过名字相，然后创造更多的一些经验画面，那画面又给它标志，那所以说就可以变成非常非常多的一些相系的相。
The fourth one is the mark of defining names. This is basically explaining how we use names. We use names to label things or concept. And we use that sort of as an anchor point. And from that point on, we grasp and attach to specific concept or things, not knowing that they're all just in your mind, in our mind, including the names themselves are also manifestations of our mind. Yet, because we attach names and we label things, what happens next is then we use those names as a way to make associations, and we further make reconfiguration of memories or concepts, whatnot, and then we proceed with making classifications of them. From that, with associations, reconfigurations, and classification, then we generate, the mind manifests even more phenomena or mental images or experiences, and one becomes many. And that is what this mark of defining names is trying to explain. Even names are all manifestations of the mind.
所以呢，记名指向我讲个故事可能我们今天就可后面的两个来不及讲像那其实小后者也可以讲记名指向我就提一个故事，就是什么？就是文字那可能很多人听过了，不过就是再讲一次再来说明这一个。就是有4个人那去就是海边那一个是诗人那诗人就先做一首诗他就找说什么孤雁已落霞栖飞就孤单的一只燕子，那以就是什么黄昏的那个霞落霞栖飞那海天共长一色，海跟天这两个人没办法是同样一个颜色这诗人就用语言，我想讲说他用语言做了一首诗
I will use a story to illustrate this fourth mark of attachment, which is related to the use of language. So the story goes, there are 4 people who go to the seashore, the seaside. And the first person is a poet. So he used poetry. He created a poem to describe the scenery. And it goes, the singular yen, sparrow, not sparrow, a kind of bird. A single bird is flying together with the lowering sun, with a sunset. So that is describing the scene, and the ocean and the sky has merged into one color. And so that is the poetry that he used to describe the scene.
那个接下来第一个是画家，画家就讲说哇，这个什么蓝蓝的什么 碧蓝的天空啊，还有什么蓝什么青蓝的天空，蓝的海水啊，然后配上这个什么，就是海滩上休闲的蓝莓啊，就是一幅非常美丽的画啊。
The second person is a painter, and he explains that all the clear blue water and sky goes very well together with the wandering people that's on the beach.
然后第三个第一个是一个地质学家然后就讲说，哎呀，你们不要那么浪漫这个海边的这个石头，或是经过几千年的风化变成这样子的而已没那么诗情画意
法师第三位他是什么身份？
地质学家，地质。
Okay, the third person is a geologist, and he said to the previous two, you guys are being overly nostalgic and overly romantic. All the sands and rocks here are the sediments from the billions of years ahead before us. So there's no need to sing or to draw or to eulogize about the scenery.
那第四位就是商人那个商人就讲说，既然大家看到这个地方那么为什么后来我们就集资来盖个海水浴场大家就可以生意会很好。
The fourth person is a businessman, a merchant. So he said, since everybody seems to prefer this place so much, maybe we should pull our money together and then we can build a resort here. And surely the business will bloom at a place like this.
那个诗人跟那个画家就讲说，你这个俗不可耐
And the poet and the painters then scolded the other two, saying, "You guys, your mind is full of just money."
所以你看这四位有没有，就是用语言，然后连接一大堆的想法、那感觉，然后大家要互相的就是大家看不顺眼的嘛，那就是用语言嘛。
So what happened between these four people is they use language to use language, and the language further gives rise to emotions, feelings, and thoughts, different kinds of thoughts. And because of these thoughts, the four people do not see eye to eye with each other.
所以你看到，你现在我在讲这几句话的时候，这个故事的时候，你们大概也会根据我的语言开始想说，法师这个故事很好说这个故事听过了吗？大家的感觉就是依照这个文字呢，就连接很多想法感觉。但是如果说今天是有一个俄国人在这边旁听他们是无知无觉的不会连接
And just like you right now, sitting here listening to my talk, listening to the story, through my use of language to tell the story, some of you are thinking that, I've heard the story before. And some of you may think, that's a really interesting story. So the language is then used to connect with thoughts and feelings. On the other hand, right now in front of us, if there are Russians who can only speak Russian and no other languages, does not speak English and Chinese, sitting in the midst of the audience right now, they would not have these feelings and thoughts as the result of my language.
好，我想先讲到这边看大家有没有什么问题那我们就把这个拿掉然后把那个屏幕弄开好。
We'll end today's talk here and now open up for a Q&A session.
好，我们现在是祝寿宽菩萨，我看到您举手，您可以向法师请问。
法师您好，我想请教一个《楞严经》的问题，然后可能跟今天的主题比较没有关系，跟前几次的主题比较有关系。就是阿难在问佛说，只要在讨论心在哪里的时候，然后阿难说心会不会在身体里面呢？然后佛说 不是，然后佛给的理由是说，如果心在身里面的话，那心应该能够看到五脏六腑才对。那这是佛的一个反驳的理由。那我有个不太懂的地方是说，这个足以成为反驳的理由吗？我的原因是这样子的，因为我记得在一些经典里面提到说，如果禅定足够深的话，其实是能够看到身体的五脏六腑的，好像是智者大师的，是还是什么？那是什么？观呼吸吗？还是什么法门里面？还是不定观里面会有这个情况？就是所以我就觉得这是一个反驳理由嘛，这是我的第一个问题。好，然后第二个问题是说，关于如果开悟的人是怎么去印证另一个开悟的人，或者是说如果有3个开悟的人坐在一起的话，彼此知道彼此开悟嘛？
知道。对，好，我第一个问题就是
自我翻译一下，好不好？
啊，对，好，
谢谢。So the audience has 2 questions, and first by setting up saying that the question is not related specifically to today's talk, but is more related to previous talks of this series. The first one is regarding Ananda questioning Buddha. Where is the Buddha questioning Ananda? Where's the mind? And Ananda answered, it's inside the body. And the Buddha rejected this answer by saying, had the mind been inside the body, had your seeing awareness been inside your body, then you would be able to see your internal organs. So because you cannot see that, your seeing nature cannot be inside your physical body. So this person in the audience asked, is that really a good answer? Is it a good answer to, is it a good basis to refute Ananda's answer? Because he has read somewhere else in the sutras, perhaps from Master Sheng in the contemplation of breathing or of impurity, that people who are deep in meditation, entering samadhi, they can actually see the inside of the body. They can see their organs. So how would this relate to the Buddha's answer to Ananda? That is the first question. And the second question is, say there are 3 people who are enlightened sitting here right now. Will they know that each other is enlightened, and how are they able to confirm each other's enlightenment? 法师好了。
好。第一个，我想，对一般人来讲，那个理由可能就足够于对一般人来说服了。那真正的话就是什么？我们在打坐的时候，我们身体不见了以后，你就发觉心还是在的啦。但是我想对普罗大众，他后面他的重点也有讲到心不在身体里面。我们在讲见2里面有讲到。所以我想那个是对一般人的解读就够了，因为后面还有你可以更多的模式来解读。
So to address the first question, I think that Buddha's answers is sufficient for the general audience. But if we use meditation experience to try to understand this, when we sit in meditation, we can clearly know that even when we lose sensations of our physical body, our mind is still there. But for now, for the general audience that is in the Surangama Sutra, and for most people, that explanation should be sufficient. And of course, it's only an example of one way to refute where the mind is, and there are other ways to argue against deluded understandings.
第二个就是开悟的对开悟者来讲很简单就是说你的心不停留在任何地方，那也没有离开任何地方。那一看你只要一对的话，就可以知道说这个人基本上是什么？是心是停留在身体，或者停留在一个特定的对象。或是心不停留在任何地方，但是也没有离开任何地方。
As for question number 2, For enlightened people, the way their mind is, it does not dwell or depart from any specific place. So if between enlightened people, they can see whether the other person's mind is stuck on any particular phenomenon, or they can see the mind is actually neither dwelling nor being apart from any phenomenon. So they can clearly see that.
这样可以吗？
好的，好，谢谢。那下一位，还是大家抓紧时间，然后每一位菩萨请先提问一个问题啊。好，下一位是宽心菩萨，然后是安正了菩萨。
法师好，刚才你说全部都是我心中的东西，都是我，也都不是我，是不是意思就是说，第一个我就是全部都是我心里面的东西，第二个都不是我，就是都不是那个无畏真人的我，是这个意思吗？
有点像，又有点不太像啊。你先看翻译好了。
The question is, earlier, Fashi, you said that all phenomenon are inside, are phenomenon manifested from my mind, or in my mind. And you have also said that everything is me and everything is not me. So the first one, everything is me, is this referring to the earlier concept that everything is inside my mind? And then the second part of this phrase, everything is not me, is this related to the concept of the true person without any, does not abide in any particular position or status? Am I linking the concepts correctly? And Fashi says, kind of.
那我想，
exactly.
我想大概可以用什么呢？用海水波浪啊，海水波浪来解释啊，就是海水叫做虚空好了啊。用海水是这边来讲还是有相能的，你把海水当做我们的佛性啊。那波浪就是各种形状啊，我们各种现象叫做波浪啊。那所有的波浪都是海水，但是呢，就是这波浪不是海水，因为什么？因为波浪消失，海水没有消失。要用这种海水波浪比较容易懂。
So I think an easier way to understand this, everything is me and everything is not me, is the analogy of the ocean and the waves. So the ocean is our Buddha nature, and phenomenon, all phenomena are the waves, and it can take on all shapes and forms. So all the phenomenon are created by the mind, so all the waves came from the ocean, but the waves themselves are not the ocean.
可以吗？
那意思就是说，也都不是我，那个是海水，是佛性，然后都是我，那个是波浪。
不是，
然后
就是波浪都是我，都是海水，啊，都不是我那个海水无相，所以那些什么那些各种造型都不是都不是。
So a further clarification, the waves are all part of the ocean, yet the waves all take on different shapes and forms. So each wave itself or of themselves are not the ocean.
或者你可以这么解释啊，就是说会生灭的现象都不是不生不灭的那个空性，都是佛性。所以都不是我。
Another way to put it is that all phenomena that arise and perish are not the same as the Buddha nature that neither arise nor perish. Or you can also say they're not me, which is synonymous to Buddha nature.
或者你也可以讲说各种造型的黄金啊， 比如说拆穿平凡，各种造型，那个造型都不是黄金，而那一些各种造型的，它都是黄金做的，所以都是黄金。
Another way to put it is that when you use gold to mold into different objects, Buddha statue or any other objects, they are not gold in and of itself. Because they take on these fixed forms. Yet, all those are also gold because they're made from gold.
好，明白了。
好，
谢谢。
晚安法师阿弥陀佛。我的问题就是关于这个，因为听今天的开示，我就是有个感觉说，我们为什么看不到这个刹那生灭，就是因为它有一种持续性嘛，就是一个相续性。对我就是了不通这个相续性和持续性到底从哪里生？为什么有这种持续性？就是因为我们才看不到实相是生灭的嘛，刹那生灭。也刚才如法师您说的二念不碰到一念，所以好像我也记得上几次您说那个火轮。哇，这个部分给我很深刻的印象，所以为什么有这个持续性啊？谢谢法师。
So the question is, based on today's talk, all thoughts or all phenomena, they arise and perish instantaneously, moment to moment. Yet we have this false sense of continuity. Why is that? Why does this sense of continuity come about? I remember you talking about the ring of fire from a point of light. And that analogy was very useful for me and helped me understand. But now based on today's talk, why do we feel that they continue? This sense of continuity is preventing us from seeing the true nature of that things are arising and perishing. The second thought cannot come into contact with the first thought. What brought it about?
大概有两个，像我现在想到大概两个了，就是说你那个显火轮，那个火轮已经消失了，你觉得它还在，所以你会跟它互动，就是已经消灭的。我们任何时间都是已经灭相，就像显火轮那个烟圈已经消失，可是你觉得它还在跟它互动，这是第一个啊。那第二个是什么？因为我们执着身体为我，所以你没有要想让身体消失。
There are two reasons I can think of immediately. The first one is, again, the fire ring analogy. The fire ring has actually disappeared. It has already perished. But we don't see that. We keep still seeing the fire ring and we continue to interact with it to reinforce it. And that is why we do not see phenomena arise and perish at every instant. That is one reason. The second one is that we are attached to our physical body. We perceive the physical body as a self. We associate, connect those together very tightly. And at the bottom of our heart, we don't want to perish. We don't want to see the body perishing. And that is why we are not able to see it, because we're afraid of it being gone.
可以吗？
Is the answer okay?
法师好，所以刚您的解释，我突然间就是那个字来到我的脑，就是说取，是因为我们的这个可以叫做取吗？还是执着？是因为我们取它，所以我本然自然的消灭的，但是因为我们的这个取它，所以它就不能消灭，然后它就持续这样子下去。
不是能所，那个所已经消失，你觉得它还在？
那我们觉得它，因为它还在，是为什么？我们
因为你不觉得它消失啊。
我们没。
譬如说，我们一直跟外境互动啊，有没有？我们不觉得外境消失了啊。
OK， 好。我觉得这个可能要继续参下去，谢谢法师。
So she follow up. What Angela follow up by asking? So is it because we are we grasp because of grasping, so we don't see that it perishing. And Fashi's answer is subject and object, the phenomena has already perished, but we don't feel that it has perished. And that's why we continue to reinforce it, to interact with it, giving rise to this false sense of continuity. And Angela Pusa said, I'll continue to mull over this to try to understand it better.
Oh, yeah.
好，我们时间有限啊，接下来2位菩萨，一位是可敬，哈利，然后还有一个菩萨是通过chat 问了一个问题，我们抓紧一点时间看一下，可能今天问题就到这儿。
法师，就我的问题是，发菩提心是成佛的根本，也是我们修行的原因跟基础。那我想问的，像你上一次有提到，默照跟参话头的2个方法，那怎么用这2个方法让我们发起菩提心，或是增长我们的菩提心？
So the question is, giving rise to the Bodhi mind is the foundation of attaining Buddhahood. That's the beginning of our cultivation. And earlier, Fashi, you have mentioned the methods of silent illumination and Huatou. So how do we use these methods to help us generate Bodhi mind and further our practice?
我们有，就说对我们来讲，我们是心跟外境切割为2，所以我们就说我们自私，那我们也想要活下去啊。那我们就是我们整个一生都是为了活命。那另外就是我的身体，这是谁的？就是我执着我的身体为我，然后想要活下去，所以等于是说你跟众生是对立的啊。那你透过默照话头，你修以后，你就发觉众生是一体的，但是你发觉众生一体，但是众生是因为什么抓起身体为我，所以在受苦，会什么就会生死，所以他们什么，你这实证的话，你默照成功的话，就实证就是你菩提心本来就有的嘛，但是就是有能守，所以我们要用，所以我们叫受苦受难，所以我们要用默照话头。
So Fashi's answer is that because we operate with duality, so there's the opposition of the mind and external phenomenon. And because of that, we are selfish. We spend all our effort day in and day out for our entire life for survival. We mistakenly think this physical body is the self as a true mind. So we do everything we can to maintain it. And in relation to that, sentient beings becomes the opposite, and we are thus selfish. So when you practice silent illumination and Huatou, if you become successful with your use of the method, you will see that all sentient beings are but one. They're one, except the sentient beings grasp onto the physical body, and that is why they undergo suffering, and that is why they undergo birth and death. So once you become successful with using the method, it naturally you will no longer see the duality, and you will become one with all sentient beings, and thus giving rise to Bodhi mind.
这样可以吗？
Is that okay?
可以，可以，谢谢。
好，那下一位哈利菩萨。
好，师父好，阿弥陀佛。您的4个人的故事很有意思啊，我是第一次听说。那我的问题是，这个不懂语言的人呢，他就听了这些会无思无解。那么是不是这故事要说的就是说语言呢，它是直接跟这个说话的人的背景有直接关系，那都有一定的片面性。我们是不是平时听到了别人说的话要意识到这一点？就是我是想知道师父告诉我们这个故事的目的是 是不是这样的？
我等一下我可以讲啊。
So the question is, Fashi, this is the first time I heard the story of the 4 people, and I find it very interesting. And I'm trying to understand your point here, that the use of language. So had it been someone who does not know the language, they would not be able to proceed with thinking and not able to comprehend. So does this mean that our understanding, our thinking is through language is related to our background? In that sense, our thinking is biased and it's partial. So we need to become aware of this fact, of this bias that we have. Is this what you're trying to tell us?
基本上语言我们一般人听了语言以后基本上我们没办法不连结譬如说我曾经做过实验我说我讲了一个什么，我讲的说，比如说电线杆电线杆是3个字，然后我就问我们的学生，那就有个人就呼出一个电线杆的，就成了一个电线杆。那第2个人他的电线杆有两条线，2条电线。那第3个人电线杆那2条电线，那上面又有2只小鸟。那第4个呢，电线杆它那个电线杆是有洞的，就他因为他是工程人员，他要爬上去修电线嘛，所以他那个电线杆是有洞的。也就是说，我们听到语言以后，那我们的连接的东西完全不一样。那我只讲电线杆了，如果我讲了一堆故事，那我把它就连接的更多。所以我们在禅修的时候，有一个就是说，你想办法阻断语言我们叫它直观你看到什么，不要给名词，不要给形容，给比较回到我们的心性本身
谢谢法师。
法师's answer is that because our use of language, when we hear language, it's the way that we work on daily basis that it's impossible for us to not make associations, to not evoke concepts and memories in our head. We can't. It all becomes very automatic. I have done a little experiment before with my students. I used the word light pole, electric pole. And it's a very simple, straightforward phrase. And I asked my students what came to their mind. The first person said, in my head, I see this image of a bear pole. The second person says, there's a bear pole, and there are 2 cables extending from it, connecting with other poles. The third person said, this light, the pole, and then there are 2 birds standing on it. And the fourth person, whose background is in engineering and construction, this person says, I see poles, but there are holes on the poles because people have to climb up to fix it, to maintain the pole and the cable. So I see holes on the pole. So even with such a simple, straightforward concept of a pole, that people can generate all these different kinds of images. Needless to say, had it been a more complicated idea that people could understand very differently. And that is why in meditation, we have this practice of direct contemplation. We try to bypass the influence of language during meditation and try to see, hear, or perceive things as directly as possible without linking that to language.